Hi, everyone. This is Stacy Heisman, and I'm here with GI Jobs. And I'm interviewing today a really interesting nonprofit, actually. Well, the man who started it, his name is Alex Mears. He's a former Navy veteran, and he started a nonprofit called Search and Acquire. And I've been doing these interviews and successful veteran transitions for many years. And this is the first one that I've come across that is totally different than anything I've seen before. So I'm really excited to jump right in with Alex. Hi, Alex.
How are you doing, Stacy?
I'm great. Thanks for joining us today. So,
Thanks for
okay,
having me.
let's get right to the beginning and let's talk about your prior service. So, what branch were you in? What did you do? Give me the who, what, when, why, and how.
Okay, great. So I was an intel officer in the Navy. So I had a fairly non-traditional path. I did not, join the military right out of school. I actually started working in finance on Wall Street and did 4 years. But I had always been very interested in the military. And this was back kind of the height of the Iraq surge, and and things in Afghanistan were not going well back in kind of '06, '07. And so decided to take a break from my finance career and join the military.
Fantastic. Wow, that's really interesting, actually. So, you were a Navy, right?
Yeah, so I was intel officer with the SEALs. So spent
Okay.
a lot of quality time in Iraq, Afghanistan, and several other places in the Middle East.
Sounds very interesting. I'd love to hear more about that, but we got to go into this wonderful business that, well, it's not a business, it's a nonprofit, and that's what kind of struck me. Um, it's called Search and Acquire, which I think is incredibly clever too, because it really states exactly what it is. But it's not a franchise. It has nothing to do with franchise. It's about small businesses. Tell me a little bit about Search and Acquire.
Sure. So let me give a little bit of background on
Yeah,
what kind of
sure.
small business acquisition is.
Yeah.
So it's a form of entrepreneurship. It's also known as entrepreneurship through acquisition.
Okay.
And it started about 30 years ago at kind of top business schools. So think like Harvard Business School and Stanford were the original places where it started. And over the last few years, it's grown increasingly popular among veterans of all backgrounds. And the basic idea, it's very simple. Rather than going and doing a pure entrepreneurial startup, which is certainly a great route for certain veterans, but candidly, the failure rate is very high. And also, there's a lot of support for that already. There are many nonprofits focused on supporting, pure startups. There's an alternate model to get to, being a CEO and owner of a business, and that is to, instead of starting it yourself, to actually go out, search for a business, a small business, and acquire it, and then step in as a CEO. So it's a different model that is not widely known, and in our experience, veterans can be ideal candidates for this. Many of whom have great leadership experiences and management experiences in the military, and when they transition to civilian life, we've seen a lot can get kind of frustrated with entry level jobs where they may or may not be managing an intern. So that transition can be difficult. And so we've actually found that veterans, one, they make excellent kind of CEOs of small businesses, because in many ways that's what they were doing in the military, leading small units. But two, they also can find it a much more rewarding experience than sort of a normal 9 to 5 job. So that's why we started Search and Acquire. There's there's an ecosystem of support for people at certain business schools, but the model is much broader than that. We've supported everyone from kind of people who are veterans who are 10 or 15 years out of graduate school, all the way to people who have literally left, an E4 who left and decided to acquire a business right out of the military. So we've covered that full range, and what we're trying to create is, educating veterans about this opportunity and creating some resources to support them. And then obviously there is a capital raising. They will have to raise both debt and equity to
That was
fund the
my other
business.
question,
And so
was about capital. Is there a lot of capital involved, or what is it? Is it something you help with, or you help find?
Exactly. Yeah. So, these businesses, just to give an idea, businesses will typically be anywhere from, $500,000 of annual profit up to 4 to 5 million of profit. And so, when you buy that business, you're paying 4, 5, 6 times that. So again, anywhere from kind of $4 million purchase price up to, we've done as large as 35 or 40 million.
Okay.
So it's a significant amount of capital, but a lot of veterans are surprised to learn, you can do that without putting any of your own capital in if you're able to go and find one of these businesses, and it's a good business and you have a good background. And so we help, match people with potential investors. And then personally, not as part of the nonprofit, I've also, we helped back quite a few veterans,
Kind of.
just personally supporting them as well.
Okay, so not only you help them search for a small business, but you help them acquire it through even helping them find investors or someone, helping them with the raising of the capital or where to go to raise that capital. And it sounds like you've even supported yourself.
Mhm.
Very interesting, Alex. Okay, so tell me, I'm just thinking about the veterans out there who are thinking like, what kind of business can I possibly own? Because I always feel like that's where they stumble is like, I want to be a small business owner, but I don't know where to start. So how do you help them? Give me an example of a business that has been successful that you can share with us.
Okay, absolutely. So I'll give two examples. One would be a lot of veterans coming out end up gravitating towards what I consider kind of like home services or basic business services. So think anything from mold remediation in homes to lawn care even, but more kind of recurring revenue lawn care businesses and things like that are kind of established businesses. Not startups. So there's not necessarily a need to have, for example, you don't have to have a tech background and be able to, program or write code. A vast majority of the businesses that we support veterans acquiring are not that at all. But we also do. I mean, we've backed a couple of veterans who decided they wanted something more higher tech, and they had a bit of software background from their military experience, and were able to use that in going out and acquiring a software business that they're able to step into the CEO role and kind of have the technical capabilities to do so.
We talked about this a little bit. There is a difference between owning a franchise and owning a
Mhm.
small business. Can you kind of speak to that a little?
Sure. So, I think the franchise I would say is like a halfway step to the full small business ownership, because
Sure.
you step in, there's a lot of the benefits of running your own show and being an entrepreneur. But there's also a lot more support and kind of overhead associated with that, right? You'll typically get kind of a playbook, obviously, from the franchisor, and it can be a great model. With the small business acquisition, you take it one step further, and you're actually going and buying an established business that you can essentially do what you want to with it in terms of
Sure.
the playbook. So there are obviously pros and cons to that. We always advise, no matter what, building up a board of advisors, board of directors and an advisory team is incredibly important, right? Because this, not surprisingly, will be the first acquisition that a veteran does. So there are a lot of people, that I work with, and have done, lots of deals with over the years, who like to support veterans doing this. And so building up that board of directors, I would say, kind of plays the same role, if you want to think of it, as the franchisor, in terms of providing guidance, providing strategic oversight in a positive way to a veteran who's acquired a business.
Well, that's really interesting. Okay, so tell me, you're a veteran yourself, and you started a nonprofit, which is just, I think, is just so fascinating to be able to connect veterans with. I call it the bridge of transition. That you kind of are that bridge. What kind of advice would you give them? What kind of advice would you give veterans leaving the service right now? Your own personal experience. What would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I think a couple quick things. I think generally, in my experience, a lot of my friends leaving the military tended to jump at the first opportunity that fell in their lap, and I think that can, I just always recommend, individuals leaving the military, you know, take some time, talk to as many people as you can in as many industries and different types of jobs, to try to get as broad a view as possible, so that you have a little bit more information before making that initial step. Because as you've probably seen the statistics, turnover rates tend to be pretty high in veterans' first jobs. And I think often it's just that kind of initial mismatch, just for that dynamic. The other thing is, there are certain types of jobs or graduate schools that are kind of predisposed to opening up options for
Okay.
veterans. And so, I'm a huge advocate of veterans who are interested in going to business school, for example. Can be a great one where you can go, you can kind of reset the career. It's often nice for veterans with families, as it gives them a little bit of time off. But during that experience, I mean, that whole 2 years is about getting exposure to various companies and businesses and things like that. And there are other ones like that, right? That I strongly recommend. So to the extent, a veteran is interested in pursuing something like that, and, we've supported veterans from all backgrounds, all the branches, enlisted officers, everything, to pursue that option as well. I think can be very, very valuable.
Awesome. Okay, so one of my last questions is, if it's 9/11, it's 20th anniversary of 9/11. So I have to ask, where were you? And Can you count, do you have any reflections looking back 20 years? It's been 20 years. How do you
Yeah.
feel like 9/11's changed us?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I can't believe it has been 20 years. So I was a junior in college, and bizarrely, I had actually not relatively recently gotten back from Egypt. So I worked in DC for the government back in in the late 90s as a summer intern, and got very interested in the rise of Al Qaeda. And it was clear that they were very interested in us, and that the U.S. government, in my view, was not paying enough attention to them. And there were very few Arabic speakers in the U.S. government. So I actually took a year off from school and went and studied Arabic over in Cairo, Egypt. So it was something that I'd been very interested in, very focused on. So obviously, I mean, 9/11 was shocking and an absolute tragedy. But clearly, it had been building for some time, and so when I reflect on the 20 years since, obviously having been, I was honored to serve in both Iraq and Afghanistan, the wars that led from that. And now as we're looking at, obviously the withdrawal from Afghanistan and looks like a final drawdown in Iraq. I mean, it's been amazing that it's been 20 years. I think no one would have guessed, I certainly wouldn't have guessed that it would have taken as long as, both those wars, as long as they did.
Sure, me too. I feel the same. So, all right. So we're going to wrap up our interview really quick, and I'm going to say, so when he wants to get a hold of Search and Acquire, if there's a veteran out there listening, how do they find you?
Yeah, so easiest way, we have a website, searchacquire.org, or you can just email me, my last name, Mears, MEARS, at searchacquire.org. We have events throughout the year. We partner with other veteran groups to sort of and schools to help kind of bring explain the model and bring the model to more veterans so they can understand some of the possibilities. I think one of the most effective ways, reach out to me and I'm happy to put you in touch with veterans who've done this. I think that's the best way to get a sense is to talk to people who've actually, acquired businesses successfully. And so that would be my strong recommendation if people are interested in learning more.
Well, I love it. And so, Alex, thank you so much for your time and giving it to GI Jobs and passing along all your great advice. And more importantly, this bridge from military life to civilian life. And I think it's really interesting to have a nonprofit to be that. And I think that's really awesome of you to do so. So thank you very much for joining us. For GI Jobs, I'm Stacy Heisman and Alex Mears with Search and Acquire. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Stacy.